Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, child migrants at the US border. Is the surge of young Central American immigrants a refugee crisis for the United States? This is such a hot political potato in the United States. Malika Blau, our digital producer of the stream, I'm intrigued to see what our online community is saying about this.
I think that's an understatement. So what's been interesting is to look at how this has been covered online. And people are widely sharing these protest images like this one. This one is of a counter-protest of the open border radicals, this person says. And this is of a protest in Murrieta, California. On the other hand, you have this is a vigil in California also. It says, in solidarity with Central American refugee children. You see someone holding a sign saying, welcome to San Diego. That's also in California. So we want you at home to join this conversation as well. Tweet us your questions, your comments with hashtag AJStream.
Joining us on the set in the studio, we have Jorge Lima. And Jorge is the director and the policy director with the Libre Initiative. That's a non-profit which advocates for economic freedom for Latino Americans. Jorge, it's great to have you here in the stream.
It's very great to be here with both of you and all our audience watching.
We are looking forward to you debating this conversation in just a moment, but hold tight for a while because this is your show and it's driven by you. So tell us what's going on in your part of the world. Very easy to do. Go to facebook.com/AJStream. That is where I am right now. And you can look to see what we're following, how we're following it. And if you have an idea, you can find plenty of space, pop in your idea, and it could be a future episode of the stream.
Hi, I'm Michael David Murphy. I'm an artist in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm in the stream.
Thousands of Central American migrants are making the dangerous journey to the United States-Mexico border, and recently a growing number of them have been children traveling alone. Of the 52,000 unaccompanied children caught by the US Border Patrol since October, most are escaping from extreme violence and poverty in countries like Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. The US government estimates that the number of children illegally crossing the border by themselves could reach up to 90,000 this year. President Obama is pushing for faster deportations, while the United Nations wants child migrants to have refugee status. So, how should the US government handle the situation? And is the surge of young Central American immigrants a refugee crisis for the United States? So here to help us talk about this, we have Jose Luis Zelaya. He is a former child migrant from Honduras. He joins us via Skype from College Station, Texas. In San Diego, Enrique Morones. He's the founder of Border Angels. That's a charity that provides food and water to people crossing the US southern border. And we also have Harry Ramos. He is a mayor pro tem of Murrieta, California, from where he joins us, and locals there recently staged a protest against housing migrants in one of the city's facilities. So gentlemen, it's great to have you all here. Let us start with Jose Luis. When we talk about unaccompanied minors, we're talking about kids basically, going from where they live in Central America to the US southern border. This is something that you did when you were 13 years old. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey? Share it with us.
For sure. So when I was in Honduras, the poverty was extreme. At the age of 5 years old, I had to witness my younger brother passed away because we couldn't take him to the hospital. And this was something horrible that on a daily basis we didn't have food to eat. Gang members were shooting at our schools. Whenever I was 12 years old, I was shot twice in both of my arms, so I escaped. I left because I was afraid of being there, of being kidnapped or being killed, and I came to the United States because my mom was already here. And in the journey, I experienced things that were horrible. I rode the train. I saw how a man lost his life. I saw how little girls were physically abused, and all of these things are the same things that these children are going through. But I was given the opportunity to meet my mother and to be reunified with her, and now I am a doctoral student at Texas A&M University, and this just comes to show that these children too can be what I became if we give them the opportunities that I've been given.
I can tell you've been used to telling your story in sound bites, Jose Luis. I want to stop you just for a moment and tell me about that day that you decided, I am going to go to America. What did you pack? What did you take?
I didn't take anything. Because I didn't have anything. I was living in the streets. I just remember that after the day that I was shot, I was scared, and I told my grandma that I wanted to be with my mom, and and that was it. She just helped me get to Guatemala, and from there she gave me to a smuggler, and that was it. My journey began. I had no food, I had no water. I was just given to a man, and then my journey began. I didn't have anything.
Wow. See, I'm looking here. We did a little sort of Google map here for where you left off in Honduras, and it's over 1,400 miles all the way up to sort of the southern border of the United States. It's pretty remarkable. Enrique, you actually help people who are in a very similar situation to Jose Luis. What are the stories that they tell you, or what do you know about their journey coming from where they live to inside the United States?
Right. Well, let me clarify one thing. You mentioned migrants or immigrants, and as Jose Luis is a testimony, these are refugees. These are refugees that if they don't leave their homeland, they're going to be killed. And the United States has a long history of promoting human rights around the world. It's important that we practice them, because when President Obama said it was a humanitarian crisis, we need a humanitarian response. And sending them back is sending them back to sure death. We have housed at this very office at least a dozen families in the last few days: El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico. And these are people that are escaping a very dangerous situation, much of it caused by U.S. policy, whether it's the demand for the drugs, where the U.S. is by far the #1 consumer of illegal drugs, whether it's been the U.S. intervention in some of those civil disturbances down there. Remember President Reagan, Iran-Contra? These are the grandchildren of those people that have had enough with the violence. They're simply trying to stay alive, because migrants that have been coming here for a long, long time come here, #1, to put food on their table, #2, to be with their family, escape the violence. And what has been taking place in these 3 great countries in Central America is just growing. And we as a country, the United States, needs to do more to create more employment and have more security, because the United States has a great responsibility. And when they came to Texas, and it's not that they came into the country illegally, they have no legal way to come in.
Right.
They turned themselves in to Border Patrol agents, were flown to California, as we recently saw. I was there in Murrieta that terrible Tuesday, 2 Tuesdays ago, and I totally blame the Murrieta police and the mayor for turning them back. Wasn't the protesters, they were across the
Enrique,
street.
hold tight for a moment, because we're just jumping ahead a little bit, and I'll come back to that, because that's really about how people are reacting to children crossing the border. Malika?
Right. Well, Enrique mentioned some of the reasons someone might cross. Well, Jorge, online people are talking about some of the other motivations that they recognize. Alexandra on Twitter says, many are running away from violence, such as those related to cartels, where death tolls make it look more like a civil war. Another person writes, after living for so long in El Salvador, I believe the problem isn't the economic situation, but the levels of violence, specifically considering those who are affected by gang violence, are essentially the lower class. Are these some of the same motivations that you
absolutely recognize? That's what we're seeing. I mean, there is a plethora of reasons why these folks are leaving, and it's hard to just blame one or the other. I mean, part of it is the violence, part of it is the poverty, the economics life that these folks are living in these different countries. Part of it is, as mentioned by our other guests today, that the policies of the United States themselves. And today we're finding ourselves in a very unique situation where the country is, America's always welcomed waves of immigrants. They are the ones who have made and formed this country. And there's some who are now worried, what is the next wave going to be like? Can the country take on this next wave? And I agree with what's been said so far, especially, you hear Jose Luis's remarks and you hear his story, and the country needs to come together and create some sort of policy. We need to decide as a country, what is our immigration policy going to be? Because we want to welcome folks like Jose Luis who want to better themselves, who are dedicated to work, to study, to get into these doctoral programs and succeed in this country. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that from Congress. We haven't seen that from the president yet. They haven't worked together to get to that point. And so you see a lot of this chaos that's kind of been happening. Now, Enrique mentioned, that we need to consider all of these folks refugees. I think we do need to be careful how it is that we're going to move forward, because the last thing we want is to start spreading more disinformation to these countries. Nobody wants to see these children making this terrifying trek by themselves. We don't want to see any more of that. That's different from saying we welcome them as immigrants if we finally had a good system that actually realized how we could absorb them, bring them into the country through better reform.
So this is the debate the United Nations kind of threw up recently. They were calling these youngsters refugees, okay? Why does that not sit comfortably with you, Jorge? If you hear about what Jose Luis was saying about the living conditions in Honduras, how difficult life is, how dangerous life is.
Absolutely.
Why would they not be refugees fleeing from basically conflict, right?
Sure, I mean, there is conflict there, and my worry with labeling refugees is something that we can't just jump into. We have to take lightly, and if that's a debate, if we need to take, as a country, a debate as to what is a modern refugee and determine whether these poverty issues or these gang violence issues are part of that, then let's have that debate. But to just say that they're refugees is unprecedented. We haven't done that. Refugees are typically those that are fleeing persecution of political or ethnic reasons. And so, right now we're talking about El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. If we open it up to these different types of definition of violence, so does that now open the door to Nicaragua, because they also suffer from issues of violence? And what about the poverty issues? I mean, there's so many countries that have a huge amounts of individuals living in poverty. Are we now opening it up to them? The country may not be ready to all of a sudden open the definition of refugee for this particular situation. That's not to say that these individuals need to be taken care of. The U.S. has to remember that these are children and mothers that are trying to cross, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of them. At the end, whether or not the process will result in some of them being sent back, that may be the case. Some of them may stay.
For a moment, because I've got a feeling that Enrique's not exactly on the same page as you, Enrique.
I just want to clarify something. I didn't say they were all refugees. The current wave of these children and parents that are coming from Central America, the majority are refugees, not all of them. Some do not qualify. But let's remember that these people, if they stay home, they're going to wake up dead the next morning. And that's what they're escaping. The majority of these are refugees, and it's important that we promote and practice what we preach around the world, because the U.S. has not always been so open-armed about receiving people that are escaping violence. Remember our terrible history with our Jewish brethren when they first tried to come into the country, taking the land from Mexico. They've done a lot of things which aren't the most honorable. But let's talk about today. We have a campaign, No Más Cruces, No More Crosses, and what that means is we don't want people to take that dangerous 1,000-mile journey on La Bestia, the train. We don't want them to be risking their lives, possibly dying, being raped and kidnapped. We don't want that. We don't want that. So we're asking the U.S. government and NGOs in Central America to have a presence where that person that's a qualified refugee or is really in danger, they can go to the embassy in El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, not have to take that dangerous journey. But we have to be more open, because right now the asylum laws and the humanitarian visas, it's almost impossible to get that visa.
Enrique, what kind of response have you got? This sounds like an interesting solution. But what's the response you've got? Well,
we're going to be in Washington in the next month. I've talked to the elected officials, Congress, Senate. They're open to the idea. We don't need any more studies. We know what's happening. We don't need any more words. We need actions. President Obama, practice what you preach. Humanitarian crisis, we need a humanitarian response. Both sides of the aisle need to work on this. Let's stop pointing fingers, because regardless of how you feel of that side or this side, the children, let's love and embrace and welcome these children while the adults figure out what we need to do.
Sure.
We're housing them right now. We have Project Teddy Bear. We're giving teddy bears to the kids when they come out of the facility. We're giving them food, providing transportation to where they're going. And we're going to continue with this, because these are all of our children.
Well, Enrique, I want to echo what someone online here is saying, basically what you're saying. William says, first, we have to understand this is a refugee crisis. It's not an immigration problem. William says there are two different situations and two different solutions. But Harry, I want to bring you in here next, because we've mentioned this previously. We mentioned Marietta. We have a video comment from someone who was at one of those protests, and this is what she had to say about what she saw. So have a listen to this.
So I was at 3 of the Marietta protests, and they were really ugly. And I would hope that any of these people, if they were sitting at home and a child knocked on their door and they were scared and hungry, I would hope that they would invite them in, give them something to eat, and then hear their story and figure out the best course of action to help them. I think that's essentially what these hearings will be, and I don't see a problem with it. I have way bigger concerns about where our money is going than the $3.5 billion going to make some kids' lives better.
So Harry, have you had a chance to listen to some of those stories of those who were bussed into Marietta, California?
I did. You know, what's interesting about this is I was at the protests almost every day, and in essence, both sides were concerned about the same thing. And I was often asking a lot of people who were for the buses reaching their destination, what if you did win and those people were thrown into a jail cell that had no beds, no showers, no eating facilities, crammed in a tiny jail cell that was designed to hold illegal immigrants that were arrested for drug smuggling. To me, that is extremely inhumane, and that's where the story really needs to go to. You know, I'm concerned about using the term refugee as well, mainly because what is that definition? Like Jorge said, I 100% agree. If we're not careful, we're encouraging the continuation of the flow of immigrants trying to make this journey. And we're seeing deaths, we're seeing unprecedented amount of rapes. How many of our kids are we willing to
have we looked? Harry, are you still there? Yeah. Harry, take a pause for a moment. Yes, I can just break it up a tiny little bit. While we just sort that out, I want to show some people some of the protests. So we've been looking at them. I want people to hear what was happening. Have a listen to this and hear what the protesters are actually saying to the bus of immigrants who are coming in or trying to get in.
Put them on airplanes and send them back to El Salvador. You guys keep going, keep going. We don't want them here. We do not want them here. They don't belong here. USA! 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 USA!
So there's this definite, maybe you can help us explain this while we get Harry back. There's this definite passion for these immigrants not to come into the town, despite hearing stories like Jose Luis's story, Enrique, what he's been seeing with people trying to cross the border, children, 90,000 children maybe by the end of the year. Why is there this passion for people not to be in by some people who are living along that southern part of the United States?
I think, so this is an issue that's been brewing for some time in this country, right? There is ties to the immigration debate, and that debate has been very, very hot in our country. The good thing is poll after poll shows that the American people are for immigration reform. We are for solutions that will help immigrants be part of this country, and that I think is very promising. America, you're allowed to have your opinions. There will be some that differ with me on that opinion and maybe welcome these children in a different fashion. I think we need to remember that these are just kids. They, by and large, they're just trying to either follow directions from their adults or trying to find something better than the situation that they found. Our laws, once they are intercepted in the border, require a certain process, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of them, that we're providing the things that Enrique mentioned that his charity provides them, so that they can go through the process and then determine whether or not they're going to be allowed to stay or sent back, depending on their situation. I mean, the judges will take case-by-case determinations and determine if it's safe for them to go back or not. We need to figure out what's in the best interest of the child. But to your question as to why are we seeing these protests, the country has been going through a few difficult years after the recession. I think there are some that fear this new wave. But again, I am at least hopeful because we continue to see that American people do believe in immigration reform, and that's something that hopefully we'll get right.
Sure. Harry, now that you've come back, I'm going to play something else, again from the same protest. So we heard people yelling, get back on the bus and get back across the border. This was the other side of that debate, right there at the very same protest.
Let them come. I am an immigrant. I came legally.
Let them come.
No. We have a chance because we came legally.
We are all immigrants. Let them come.
We're all immigrants. Let them come.
Everybody come.
So even in your own area, in your own city, there are people who actually think it's okay and are helping immigrants to come in. Why is there that split? Why are you not all on the same page here?
Well, first off, in America, you have freedom of speech. I don't think you can poll any city and have a unanimous opinion on any topic across the board, even what's the best football team.
Yeah.
Having said that, the vast majority of the citizens were very concerned, and I think most of the concerns came from misinformation from the federal government. The city, no official contact was ever made to the city. Federal government, Homeland Security, nothing. So we had no idea what was being proposed.
So children just turned up? Is that the situation?
The buses, we actually heard it through the rumor mill from Border Patrol agents.
Not accurate.
That it is very accurate. We were requesting information. The only way that we got information is once we heard it from a news article, we contacted the head of the Border Patrol in the area, and then they confirmed it. We were never contacted directly first.
Okay,
And
so Enrique is saying, pushing back on that. Enrique, why would you say that?
Well, first of all, the protests that you showed were two different protests. The first protest was the Terrible Tuesday protest, where Marietta is now the new Selma, Alabama. A terrible display of the worst in the American spirit when you saw the Marietta people and outsiders protesting, and the Marietta police stops the bus so that the protesters could get in front of the bus. They never should have done that.
Yes, that was
the mayor
June
had a town
1st.
hall beforehand. The mayor, it was July. The mayor had a town
July
hall,
1st.
and he said that they were coming. He knew they were coming. Why would he say that? The racist that was exhibited then, the racist that was displayed then, has come home to roost. And you see now that he's saying, the mayor, now I'm not talking about this gentleman, but the mayor, now he's saying, oh, I'm Hispanic. Why is he saying these things? The Marietta, the face of the mayor, the police force has been shown. No, today here in our office, we have people from Marietta that came to bring supplies. So it doesn't have the entire Marietta community, but they told me there's a tremendous amount of racism in Marietta. Most people had never heard about it. But when they think of Marietta today, they're not going to think about it in a good light. But that Marietta moment is a moment in which people will turn around the immigration debate, because we got to remember, there is no line for people to get into. When they say, oh, get in the legal way, there's no legal way for them to come into. And the people that are protesting, those are people of European backgrounds when there was no legal versus illegal. When in the 1980s, President Reagan says, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And in the 1990s, the U.S. builds a wall. That's killed 10,000 people.
Right, so
I'm having a hard time following the logic. All
right, so gentlemen, just hold tight for a moment, because we can take all of this to the post show. We've got a little bit more space. Enrique already explained to us what he felt should be the procedure for what happens when thousands of youngsters head into the United States. If we're talking kids here, Harry, kids by themselves, would you want to send them all back? What's your plan?
Ma'am, we have to have an honest conversation and not distort the situation. I am telling you that. So
just tell me about the kids. Let's just not worry about dates and times and protests. That's not that important. Kids are important. 90,000 kids are. For this part of this conversation, Harry, this is really important. So we can just hear very clearly what you would do with all these kids, 90,000 children, by themselves, unaccompanied, without their families. What do you want to do with them?
None of the unaccompanied minors were brought to Marietta. These were all accompanied family units. That's number one.
And what do you want to do? What do you want to do with them? Just in the last minute of our show, what's your plan?
You cannot put them inside of jail cells.
All right.
You cannot put them in
So you can't do that. What do you want to do with them, Harry? I'm pushing you just a little bit, and then we've got more time on the other side.
I think that we have to stop, contain, and be humane about all of this.
Stop, contain. So what does that mean? You're going to send them home?
I think that we should allow the process that's in place right now work out, allow them have their day in court. Okay. If we need to have a discussion about what is the definition of refugees, I am open to that. But we have to follow the rule of law. We have to understand that the reason why people want to come to America is because we're a nation of laws. And what they're trying to escape is lawlessness.
All right. Harry, just hold tight there for a minute. Sorry to push you, but we're literally at the last minute of this part of the program. But we have more time in the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. We're taking all of our guests there. Malika, what are we getting from our online community?
A little perspective on both sides. Steve on Facebook says, any kid who could walk for days to get here to save themselves from violence should be granted U.S. citizenship. On the other hand, Bradley just tweets in, the U.S. literally cannot take every victim of violence in the world.
Okay, to be continued in the post show. But first, let me tell you about our next show. Can women really have it all? And by that I mean a career and a happy home life. Or is it time to rethink what it means to be a successful woman? I bet you have an opinion on this, so share it now on Facebook, or you can tweet us at #AJStream, and you might just end up in the next program. Stay with us. We're taking Jorge and Harry and Enrique and Jose Luis to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. It's not too late to tweet them. #AJStream. See you online. Hello again, this is the Stream's online post show. We're discussing child migrants and the US border immigration crisis. Let's get right back to that conversation. So Harry and Enrique, you were both talking about it's good to have a conversation. I want you to have that conversation right now. Harry, what is it that you would conceivably think might actually work? And it'd be really good to hear the other side from Enrique, so talk to each other. Harry, you start.
I think it's important for us to clearly come up with how we're going to solve this problem, and then actually follow the laws that are on the books. I agree that we do need some type of reform in our immigration policy. We should make getting visas and the ability for people to come in legally. I'm all in favor of that. But we can't ignore the fact that what we're doing right now, even though you might have good intentions, can have bad consequences. And that's what you're seeing right now is, for the argument of pushing immigration reform in this nation, certain people on the other side of the aisle are willing to sacrifice children, are willing to sacrifice women, and to me that's completely unacceptable. And those people in Marietta that were protesting allowed the buses to go there. It was completely inhumane.
All right, so Harry, take a breath for a moment, because I see Jose Luis nodding his head quite violently. Jose, what's going on here? Jose Luis?
You know, I think that is disrespectful to humanity to politicize this issue and to think about what a definition is, but instead to think about what these children are running from. It is horrible to be a child and come to this country, and we didn't come here because of laws. We didn't come here because we want to be happy. We're running away because we're being killed. Because every morning at night, whenever you wake up, either your door has bullet holes, or you walk outside and you're being stabbed. I was stabbed, my friend, at the age of 9 on my way to school when I was on a bus. I was 12 years old and I was playing soccer, and I was shot twice in both of my arms. I came to the US because my mom was here. I was a refugee, and what these children are going through is even worse, because the violence has gotten worse, the poverty has gotten worse, and I think that as a nation,
but doesn't that prove my point that that is lawlessness? That is exactly my point. The reason why you did come to America is because we are a nation of laws.
Right, but we are also a nation of mercy, and we're also a nation of welcoming, and a nation that is gracious. I was given an opportunity, and look at me, now I'm a teacher. Now not only I'm going to serve my community in the United States, but I want to build a school in Honduras. And I think that we can create a cycle. We are that society that we can change this, not just politically, but we can help people in Central America. I understand it's not only the responsibility of the United States, but can we work together? Not deporting these children. Deporting these children is not an option, because if we do, their blood is on us.
All right, let's Enrique, what did you want to add?
I wanted to tell Jose Luis that he's my hero. He exemplifies what is taking place. And Harry, there's no such thing as illegal immigrants. These are human beings. There's no legal way for the people to come into the country. There's 250 million undocumented people in the world. Most aren't coming to the U.S. So this nonsense about everybody wants to come here, that's not true. They're trying, in the case of the Central Americans, they're trying to escape this violence. The U.S. has a tremendous responsibility there. So there's much more that we can do. You're right, it's a bipartisan issue.
That's a matter of opinion. Of course, there is such a thing as illegal immigrants. It's not a matter of opinion,
that's a fact. And
it is.
The lawlessness that was displayed was in Marietta, blocking buses for free transport, insinuating a riot like the mayor and the police allowed in Marietta.
So you support allowing those kids to go to jail? So in the flip side of that,
being killed. That's why they should have been able to go into the detention facility.
You're saying that the buses should have arrived at Marietta.
They were.
So what you're saying is you agree that they should have been eating on the floor next to a toilet.
No,
you can't paint a picture that's not true.
I have a question for.
I was there. They should have more humane detention facilities.
Did you see the cells?
Having the people scream, yes. Having the people scream and bang the American flag against those buses was the worst of the American
So then you're saying then you would have preferred the people not to protest.
The police force, shame on you. Shame on you.
All right, gentlemen, take a pause, because Jorge wanted to actually jump in there. Jorge, what did you want to say?
I had a question for Enrique and Jose Luis. You know, I think we agree on the idea that America is the land of opportunity, and we hope that we can continue to be that opportunity for individuals that are always trying to get in here. But do you recognize that there is some sort of risk that if we now said that all of these folks are refugees, or however you want to describe them, and allow them and make sure that Jose Luis, you said not deport any of them. There is a risk that will encourage more of these children to get on La Bestia and come and make this trek. What do we do about those? Because you said it yourself, Jose. You know, you saw people die along that trek. How do we have to be responsible in our actions, because everything's going to have an effect, right? So even if we just said now, look, we are going to allow all of them because of the situation, we risk encouraging more of these kids to come on their own. What do we do about that?
But also, for instance, in my story, I can only share from my experience. I was allowed to stay due to fear of persecution within my own nation. Later down in the line in 2000, I was actually given a deportation order because I was not able to prove my case of political asylum because I had no evidence. So even if these children, it's not just allowing them to stay, but it's allowed giving them, I think number one, giving them legal guidance, right? And allow them to defend themselves in court, but also to look at it from a bigger perspective, from the perspective that San Pedro Sula is the capital of violence in the world. That people are being murdered left and right, and that the conditions there are very horrible. And I think that we need to bring it back to the humane issue.
All
that
right,
these
so,
children,
Jose Luis, let me just
them,
interrupt here, because Jorge made a very good point. You talk about a humane issue. He was also talking about a humane issue. What 13-year-old should have to go from Honduras to the southern part of the US by themselves and almost die? So that's the bit that he's concerned about. What do you say about that bit? You made it, right. Other kids didn't.
Right, and I think that we need to also think about how do we actually fix it, correct? I think that we need to work with Central American countries, and we need to not only provide aid in the forms of money, but also in the sense of mentality. We have the mentality on how to fix the education system. Okay. Whenever a person, I promise you this, a person is getting $2 a day, and a pound of beans is $1 a day. How is that possible? It's inhumane, the social conditions that they're living, poverty, violence, and it's just too much.
Okay, so guests, take a pause for a moment, because obviously you've got a lot to talk about, but our community also wants to talk to you too. Malika.
Well, I want to bring in this video comment from someone who says this is a humanitarian issue. Everyone have a listen.
More than anything, the United States needs to accept that this is an international humanitarian crisis. This isn't a border security issue. This isn't a political issue. These kids aren't just sneaking across the border and walking home free. They're actually being apprehended. They're turning themselves in. It's not the security that's the issue. You know, this is a crisis occurring in Central America that has fell on the United States front porch, and they have to deal with it some way or another.
Jose Luis, when you were making that trek, very dangerous trek as you've told us, did it ever cross your mind that you would be breaking the law once you entered the US, and did that really matter?
I think this is one of the things that I do. I agree with Harry. I think that whenever he talks about that Honduras is a nation where laws are not being followed, I think that he is correct. So the mentality that you're breaking a law, it's not there. What you're thinking about is being with your mother, is being with your sister, wanting to like run away from the circumstances. I think that outside from the politics, I didn't even know what undocumented was. I didn't know what the American dream was. I came because I was tired of being shot and stabbed and seeing the things that I had to witness. I have had 6 surgeries, including a nose reconstruction, because of what I lived over there. So when I came, I was not thinking to break a law. I love this nation. I'm gracious to this nation. I followed the law because I am thankful to the law. Never in my mind I was thinking I was breaking the law.
Let's remember that there's that this nation of laws, and most countries around the world are nations of laws. But let's think of this country, the United States, a great country. Some of the laws that we've had in this land: women couldn't vote, child labor, slavery. Those were laws of the land. There's laws that are immoral. 2 people dying every day right now because there isn't humane immigration reform is immoral. And one of those 2 people today is a Central American little boy or little girl. The U.S. needs to stop the demand for illegal drugs.
This is the problem.
The U.S. needs to create a line that the people can come into, because there's no humane way for them to come into. They don't want to come to this country. They just want to come where they can be fed, where they can be taken care of. That's why they traveled. We in Mexico have received about 25% of these people. That's their final destination. Most are crossing into the United States. But it's important that we need to be consistent with our policies.
Enrique, I hear you've made this point really clearly. Let me just hear what Harry has to say, just very briefly, Harry, because I need to wrap up the conversation.
The problem is that when we try to have this conversation, we start pettifogging and bringing up, talking about, if you start talking about women cannot vote back in the day, I don't understand what that has to do with the price of eggs. We're talking about right now, we have tons of kids who are in a terrible position. There are more adults in that terrible position. For example, where's the outcry about Mexican children that are being thrown back because they're bordering the borders? Let's just expand it to everybody. Now, we have to have a system. Let's have a conversation about how do we fix the immigration process so people could come into the country legally. I'll have that conversation all day.
Right.
Well,
in fact, we've had that conversation for 40 minutes, and there's so much more to add. Let me just tell you about something that's happening right now. We were waiting in San Pedro Sula in Honduras for a flight of children who've been deported from the US. They were unaccompanied minors heading back into Honduras. Is that the answer? Is that the solution? That makes me very sad, Jorge.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some circumstances that will be the solution, because perhaps
sometimes you do have to put kids on a plane and send them back to the murder capital of the world.
If they are going through the process and an immigration judge determined that it is in their best interest to send that children back, I don't know the children that are on that plane, but maybe they are going back to be reunited with their family, with their parents. We don't know. You know, I think one thing important to remember, you know, our country, even the Supreme Court has always said that we don't see deportation as punishment, you know, as burdensome as it may be for these immigrants that are trying to come over.
Maybe because they don't live there, it's not seen as punishment. If maybe you grew up where Jose Luis was, that would most definitely be
sure. And I think his story is very compelling. But we don't know the details. I think, right to your answer, some of them will have to be deported back.
Okay.
I think it's important that we follow the process, because that is what's going to stop. Parents that are making this difficult decision need to have the right information, and right now we have disinformation going down there. So we need to make sure before they do that.
Yeah, Harry, you have the last word, and that word is what?
Real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was a born poor kid in America's standards in the Bronx. I grew up near the projects, but single mom. My dad was an alcoholic. You know, I grew up kind of tough. But if I was given at any point in my life an option to be an orphan, awarded a estate in Beverly Hills, California, or go back with my family and be raised with the people who love me, in a heartbeat, I will pick my family. I think that's the best solution in a lot of cases, is that children need to be with their families. Let's not talk about refugee status. Let's talk about how do we help these countries, and let's get a better process and allowing people to come into the nation. That's truly the solution. Not having these kids riding trains and women getting raped and being abducted. That is just crazy talk.
Do you know, you've just driven Enrique and Jose Luis crazy, because they have so much more to say back to you. But this is the point of this debate. It's a conversation. Do you see my grey hairs? See my grey hairs right here?
I just want to say something.
Nobody. You're banned. How do I say the end in Spanish? It's the end. Yes, exactly. But I know you're online. This is why we have Twitter. Thank goodness for Twitter. We are going to take this conversation with Jorge and Harry and Enrique, Jose Luis online. What was Jose Luis' one last thing that he was going to say? We will find out at #AJStream. To be continued. Meanwhile, on the next show, different subject for different day. Can women really have it all? That's a career and a happy home life. Or is it time to maybe rethink about what a woman's success actually means? Let's speak to our guests about this very often debated issue. We will see you online. Don't go away.